What is a property? A property describes an object, or it's something that an object has. Well, let's take a look. Cladunk. Well, let's make an object first. So var circle is equal to a new zim dot circle. Oops. Here we go. And then we'll add this to the stage and we'll center it. So circle dot center on the stage. And we have a stage dot update there. So let's just see what a basic circle looks like. So we'll view this in a browser. And there she be. So that's a default circle, black, and sitting there centered on the stage. So we can set a property of that circle. One of the properties is its color. Circle dot color equals yellow. Oh, we'll make it a sun. So we save that up. And note we use the dot syntax. So circle, that's the object, dot, and then its property. And we're assigning that property the color yellow. And we save this, refresh, and there it is. Now it's yellow. Now you can pass in the color of the circle right here if you want as a parameter. And with many of the Zim objects, most of the properties you can pass in as a parameter and set right at the beginning. But anything that we might want to change later, any property that we might want to change later, then we usually provide that to you, or hopefully we do. And let's see, there's also the position. Position is a good property. Circle.x is equal to 800, for instance. And that will move the circle to an x position of 800. A refresh. And there it is. And we can also ask for, so we will zog circle.x. Oops. So now we're not setting it anywhere. Well, we set it when we centered it. So the center method here actually changes the x position of the circle. But let's find out what it is. So we can ask for a property as well in the same way and even use the property. So now we're going to take a look. We refresh here, it's back in the center. And where is that? F12, 512 pixels. Okay. Now let's see, aside from the x, there's also the scale, circle, doesn't quite look right, circle dot scale. Now it's not just scale equals 2, it would be nice if it were, but we provide scale x, and now we can scale in the x position. There it is. And we also provide scale y, and these are basic properties that are provided by Create.js. Scale y. Create.js is what powers Zim.js. So we save that, and now both of them are scaling. And we refresh. Because this is quite common where we want to keep the aspect ratio, Zim provides a shortcut for that, and that is circle.scale. And we'll try 4, for instance. So now this scales both the scale x and scale y. It's a little shortcut, and that's a method, not a property. We'll talk about methods in another what is a method. So we save that up, and let's see if this now bumps it up to a scale of 4. By the way, the scale, if a scale is 1 is its normal scale, scale of 0.5 would be half as big, etc. All right, so what else have we got? Well, how about where do we find these properties? We could just keep on going and adding them, but is there a list of them somewhere? So that would be in the documentation. Let's go to the Zim site. I'll open up a new tab here, go to the Zim site, and choose Docs. And how about a circle? Circ, and enter. And here we are, Zim circle. So these are some of the things that we can pass into the circle. The radius, the fill, which is its color, and the stroke, that's the color of the stroke and the stroke size. And in the documentations, it talks about those parameters there. It lists the methods, and then here are the properties. we can access the shape. Now, these are properties specific to the circle. There's also some generic properties we'll take a look at in just a second. But the circle has a shape, and that accesses the shape inside the circle. There's a color, and we set that one. Gets and sets the fill color. The width and height, so we can set the width and height. And if we set a width to, say, 100, it will then make the height also proportionally go. And if it's a circle and therefore round, it would set the height to 100 as well. So these things change both, but the width only would only change the width. So if we set the width to only to 200, then that would move to 200 and the height would just stay whatever the height was. There's mouse children, etc. But these are probably the more interesting ones are the generic properties that we can set on all containers. So all containers, which all Zim display objects are, except for specific ones like shape, bitmap, movie clip, and sprite. Those are their own things, and a container is a container, obviously. But all of the things like buttons, well, let's look at them here. Rectangle, triangle, label, button, checkbox, all of these ones, pane, window, waiter, those are all containers. So all of these Zim components, the display objects that we see, they will have these properties as well. So that is X and Y for positioning, rotation for the rotation of the object, scale X and scale Y as we saw, reg X and reg Y do the registration points. That's what it will scale about or what it will rotate about. And indeed, when we position an object, it positions it at its registration point. And then there's skew X and skew Y, which we don't use all that often. But these are transformation properties. And they come with create.js container, and the Zim container extends a create.js container, so it also has these properties. And then all of these things, including the rectangle and the triangle and the circle that we're seeing, they also include these. They extend a Zim container and therefore have these properties. There's also alpha. That's its transparency, what cursor it has, a shadow, mouse children, mouse enable, parent, num children, composite operation, etc. There's actually more. So you would have to go see the documentation, create.js, easel docs, and look up container properties to see them all. But these are most of the properties that they're the properties that we use the most. Okay, let's try some more exciting properties. Okay, so we'll just pop on back. No, I'll leave that open just in case. Leave that. Instead of a circle, why don't we take a look at how about a slider? So var slider equals a new slider, not a slicer, that's good. We'll just do a default slider, and let's put that slider on the stage, and we'll get rid of that stuff. Okay, so here's a default slider. Let's take a look. We refresh here, and there she be. So there's a default slider operating in the center of the stage. Now, one of the properties of a slider is its current value, which will tell us where that slider's at. Because if we're going to use a slider, we want to know how much, what value is it at. So that's its current value property. So it's more exciting to find that out as we change the slider. So we need a change event, and we'll see events in another what is an event. Okay, but for now we'll just throw one in here. So that is slider.on change. We call this function. There we go. And inside that function, let's find out what the slider dot current value is. I would have liked to use value, but value is a keyword, so I decided to call it current value. And let's see what that gives us. So we save that up, and it's going to console log it, zog it. So we'll open up the console with an F12, and when I change the slider, there it goes. It started at 0, it's got some nice decimals in here, and it looks like it's going to 10. So by default, it goes from 0 to 10. Okay, and then we can use this number to say set a volume or something like that. Now there's rotation as well. Oh, well, I don't know if we should rotate the slider. I guess we can rotate the slider. So slider dot rotation equals 20. Let's see what that looks like. We save it up. Will it still work? Refresh there, and we rotate. It's still giving us the values. That's kind of funny, isn't it? Now, note, it seemed to, oh, I know what we can do. Why don't we set up so that as we slide, we'll make the rotation equal to the slider's value. So instead of just setting the slider here, we'll put it inside here. Chadunk. Slider.rotation equals, and we can say, I'll copy this, slider.current value. Why don't we multiply it by 2? So I think the current value goes up to 10. So now we're going to be rotating it up to 20 degrees. Let me save this and let's see if this works. Let me save that. And as I slide, the slider rotates. That's kind of silly. But note that the slider is rotating around that end point. What do you think of that? That's its registration point. By default, its registration point sitting at 0, 0 there. And as we slide, it's rotating around there. What if we wanted it to slide around the center of the slider? Well, to do that, we would set the registration point of the slider. That's a property. So slider.regx is equal to slider.width divided by 2. Oh, we used another property. The slider's width is how wide it is. And the registration point, we're going to set it to there. Now, let's see. We've centered it, and then we've changed the registration point. What will happen is we may end up shifting the slider as well. Let's refresh here. Yeah. See, we centered it, so that put the registration point here, and then we asked for the registration point to move, and that actually caused this to move. But we should see that, oh, indeed, it is now rotating around the registration point. Now, if we wanted to avoid that, there's a couple things we can do. First of all, we can actually center the registration point with a handy center reg. So what that does is it's a method, and we'll see methods later, that centers the registration X and the registration Y, and then adds it to the stage. So now we have a centered registration point on the slider, on the stage, without even having to do this. But it is indeed this type of thing that goes inside of center reg that's happening there. So we save this up. Now we should see a centered slider with a centered registration point. And there we go. And you can see that that's rotating around the center of not only the slider, but the center of the stage. So that's kind of neat. And if we go times 20, what would that do? Oh my goodness, I don't know. It'd be a sort of a weird experience, I expect. That is too weird. Yeah, I guess it's going. Yeah, not terribly fun. You shouldn't rotate your interface as you're using it in general. Okay, so that's a little bit about a property. Is there anything else? You can read the properties as we saw. You can set the properties. Some properties are read-only, and that would say in the documentation that you can only read this property, and you're not allowed to change it. I think we're good. Isn't that wonderful? Now, a property itself is a holder of some information, some data. And that's very much like what a variable does. A variable is a holder. And indeed, properties much like a variable stored, well, it's not quite a variable stored on an object, but it's along those lines. We use a keyword this, and that stores our identifier name right on the object itself. And we'll see more of that in one of the advanced what is when we talk about how we can make our own classes. And that they have properties and methods and events. Excellent! Woohoo! So we'll see you guys later. I'm Inventor Dan Zen here at zimjs.com, where we have lots of properties. Ciao.